Welcome to Thinkin Bros. I'm Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we're going to be talking about what should have been episode 1. And it's going to be on what is the point of a philosophy? Why are we doing this? What should philosophy be used for? And I would like to pass the mic to you and know, what are your first thoughts on this? Why are we doing this?
Well, first of all, I think it's easier to start with the common view of philosophy, just to debunk sort of the initial fear of some people. And I know you've had trouble with people getting invited on this podcast and then being sort of scared knowing this is a philosophy podcast and hesitating because they don't know if they're worthy of the title philosopher, if they can speak with us philosophers. But I think people are just scared, like not taking philosophy classes in university or in high school or something to just approach the subject, because a lot of the times it gets encumbered with sort of terminology and all these complex writers, which normal people and probably philosophers, if I'm a philosopher like us, wouldn't understand. But it's just terminology that you need a bit of time to spend on, and then you understand it. But independent of that, the sort of philosophy we're doing doesn't need big terms. The sort of philosophy we're doing is just what philosophy should be, in our opinion, is just analyzing life and talking about problems and conundrums and sort of solving everyday problems or sometimes a bit more complex problems, just talking about it rationally and thinking. Basically, that's what philosophy is. And it doesn't necessitate all these fancy terms, and it doesn't need to be scary to the public. Anyone can philosophize about anything if you just spend a bit of time thinking and discussing with people, and sharing opinions and possible solutions to problems. So yeah, that was maybe less clear than I wanted it, but I think that was good.
Yeah, what bothers me the most is the fact that philosophy started off the correct way. Okay, it was Socrates sitting around with intelligent people, or maybe just regular people, bouncing off his theories or denying theirs about the world. And this is what I like. It was a shared act, and it didn't necessitate any hyper intelligence. I've written blog posts about this, but I think the pit hole in which philosophy falls now is just self-contained gibberish, because it started off on the right foot. Then all these people came around and invented theories that are too perfect. And here's what I mean by that. So let's say we evolve. Let's take the most rational view of how the world was created, right? The Big Bang, right? We evolve as a species. Evolution happens. Blah blah blah. What I don't understand is why people think that philosophy must be perfect mathematically. Let's say you take consequentialism. It is a mathematical equation where you plug x as, for example, in hedonistic utilitarianism, x is well-being or happiness, right? Or pleasure even. And people think that you can base an entire theory on this perfect mathematical equation that will result in all of the answers to the universe. But if it almost seems to me like a religious way of seeing it, where it must be that perfect. You understand? So if we're just some animals that evolved the brain and can now use intellect, why would it be so clear cut and perfect as to become a mathematical equation? That's what I don't understand.
But would you say, you said Socrates, right? And then later you have a problem with later philosophies that they're too mathematical, but Aristotle practiced virtue ethics, right? And tried to devise a system which was, as best as he could. But do you think the inferior precision, the less ambitious, the diminished ambitiousness of virtue ethics is a good side of it, because it doesn't have clear answers where you have this situation, you should do this because this. Sometimes it's up to debate, right? in a particular situations, two virtues are opposed, and then one wins, but you discover what wins by arguing and by thinking about the different virtues and which one dominates. So the inferior precision of virtue ethics is an asset for you, right?
100%. That's very perspicacious of you. That's exactly what I mean. And I think Socrates was this very grounded in reality, because you know how he always gives these examples of, well, is the art of the doctor to heal the body or the mind? Something like that, right? Very grounded with reality, and very ambiguous, because one of the things that Socrates left in this world is more questions than when he joined this world. So I think he was very good at counter arguing and showing us that using rationality combined with intuition, we know much less than we do. Aristotle is a good legacy to that, where I think there's something very natural about the yin yang of the universe. You know, I talk about that a lot, and certainly it's more in tune with the laws of nature to just be like, okay, what is the vice? Like, name a vice, right? Greed. Okay, what's on the other side of that spectrum? Because we have antonyms, right? The language developed to have antonyms. So what is on the other side of greed? That doesn't matter. He wants us to search for the golden mean, right? The perfect center of that. I think it goes along with a lot of our intuitions about happiness, where if you exaggerate something good, it's not going to be as good. If you exaggerate something on the bad side of the spectrum, it's not going to be good as well. So yeah, the golden mean is just the perfect balance between an exaggeration of good and an exaggeration of bad. Let's say the best example for that is probably being cowardly, which is on the low end of the spectrum, and on the upper end of the spectrum is being extremely courageous to the point of foolishness and accepting any challenge without even thinking about, oh yeah, sure, I'd fight a bear. I'd fight a bear. I'm pretty sure there are men in this world who think they could fight a bear, right? So, and when you're on the perfect center of that, you are a realist, essentially. You know exactly what is a threat, what isn't, what is worth fighting, and what is worth running away from for you. And that differs for everyone, which is why it's so ambiguous, but it's also, in its ambiguity, it's perfect because we are all so different from each other.
You seem like you want to go off on a rant for terminology and everything. You got the book out, but just before you go to that, I just wanted to add this comment that philosophy is the base for all the sciences and basically everything, right? It's the first thing that happened is just thinking. And then from that, when you develop research methods and scientific tools, you get, the sciences we have today. Psychology is heavily influenced by philosophy, clearly, but also, mathematics, in the sense that philosophy and logic are pretty much this, like, courses in logic are within the philosophy department. And just everything, all the sciences started from philosophy, because what philosophy is thinking. And so people shouldn't forget that, and people should understand that we're all philosophers. And it's not a scary term, it's just thinking.
We're all philosophers insofar as you actually make the effort to think. And I think everyone is capable of it, but not everyone does it. So I think that would be fair to say. So my problem with later philosophers, of course, is that I always say this. The reason stereotypes exist is because they're true, or at least they were at some point in history. And the thing about the philosophers is that, one, they're depicted as usually crazy, and two, lonely, right? That's kind of what philosophers are, with all these crazy photos or eccentric stories about them, like Diogenes. And my question is, well, if you're trying to make something that is applicable to all, which, okay, we can get into the point of philosophy after, and can be accepted by all and lead everyone, like a religion, how can you be a secluded person? How can you allow yourself to sit in a room and write for 8 hours a day and not go out there and bounce your theories off of other people? And this is what I mean about theories being mathematical, right? You take Kant, he posits that there are absolutes, right? Okay, if we determine that lying is bad, lying is always bad. It's just a bad thing. My problem with it is, why would it be so perfect? Why would just a natural world where we evolve from unicellular organisms and develop a rationality, why would it allow for something so perfect? Is what I don't understand. I think people want to be pleased about, here are the exact boundaries of this, and it must extend to everything. It's like, okay, consequentialism, yeah, pleasure is everything. Everything. It doesn't matter. I don't know, purpose. Do you want to be led with purpose? No. Hedonistic utilitarianism says, if you can just make people happy, everything else goes away. And then when you invent, I've given the example from Luther, the Fallen Son, I believe that's the film, and it's network of dark web just criminals, and they're watching a live stream of someone getting tortured, and they're receiving immense pleasure from that. And the problem with that is the consequentialism would say, well, 100 people, or more than that, right? Let's take 1,000 just to be safe, are receiving extreme pleasure from someone getting tortured. So the discontent of one person is outweighed by their extreme pleasure. And then you take, I don't know, 3-4 people that are missing that person who was kidnapped, and it's whatever, right? Consequentialism says, if there are enough evil people in the world that are pleasured by something, you can just do it. And in fact, it's the most moral thing, and not doing it would be immoral. So I have problems with something like that, in a way where, as soon as it predicts something as so problematic, it's not like, oh, well, yeah, consequentialism is great, but it has this problem sometimes. No. It's a bad theory, because what you try to create is something universal. And I think it just proves that something so mathematically perfect is impossible in a naturalistic setting.
And this makes me think, I think it's like a perfect analogy. I'm just by nature not a very extreme person on one side or the other. I have ease with just seeing both sides of a debate and seeing the good points of both sides. And what you're saying right now reminds me of politics, right? Where some people are on the extreme left and some people on the extreme right. And it's so certain that both of those people are wrong, and that the correct position is somewhere in the middle, right? Depending on the situation of the country, or how the culture is established, or the the environmental happenings, or whatever. Just even in a vacuum where influences are reduced, I feel like a good political position is in the middle, where you're pulled to one side, but you also understand the other side, and you're pulled to the other side for some things. And it's the same thing here, right? You could make the analogy of like being on the extreme left is like being a Kantian thinker, where you're just dogmatically following all the rules of that. And then if you're on the right, you're a consequentialist and you follow the rules of all that. And on both sides, you're certainly wrong, and you need to consider both sides. And somewhere in the middle lies the answer. And yeah, I thought that was a good analogy, and it seems so evident to me that it's weird that some people just don't see that. I feel like some of those theories match so well with people's temperament and personalities, that it seems so true that they fail to consider the other side. Once again, I'm not infallible, so maybe I'm wrong and that's not true, but that's how I see it.
100%. And then people seek so avidly to have, categorize you into something to save them mental space, that now being a centrist is another category. And that's a problem in itself for me. I always say, oh, well, which side of the spectrum are you on, the political spectrum? What do you mean political spectrum? I have my opinions that have been worked through from zero. I can tell you my opinion on everything. I don't adhere to something pre-made for me. If you want to call me a centrist, whatever, right? But it just means I'm in the middle 98th percentiles. That doesn't give you information. I think people want to save mental space a lot, and I think a lot of philosophical theories fall victim to that. I think it's good to have explored them, but I don't understand how to this day some people can still click with these theories that have been debunked for hundreds of years. And this is why I always say that philosophy has become self-contained gibberish. It has lost itself in itself, right? It's like, okay, here let's answer the most fundamental questions of the universe. And now it's like, no, but there must be a perfect answer, an answer that is always 100%, right? Consequentialism, I can explain a theory that rules every single thing, right? Every single moral consideration in the world in, I guess, under a minute, if you challenge me to do so. Same thing, well, kind of same thing with Kantianism, if you understand the categorical imperative. And I think that's a problem because in seeking something so perfect, this is where the thing about metaphysics comes in. And I have so many problems with metaphysics. In fact, I don't even really know what it means, but I don't think anyone knows what it means. And I think you're operating in another plane of reality where you tell yourself, even Socrates fell victim to that. So Plato writes about the theory of the forms, and if I can kind of summarize it for you, it would be every single thing. Let's say the form of beauty, and the easiest one to depict. Every single thing that is beautiful to us, right? Everything that gives you the intuition of saying, okay, this is beautiful, is a manifestation of the form of beauty. So it's like beauty with a capital B, right? It's the beauty, the source of all beautiful things. And even that enters the realm of metaphysics where you're like, well, okay, but what is it, right? Okay, if we want to figure out what it is and answer this question of, okay, I can determine everything that is beautiful in this universe through figuring out what is beauty. Okay, so what is it? How do we get to it? And when you put it in an alternative plane, to me, you make philosophy less human. You diverge from reality. Now, the way I usually depict it and how it's going to be in my book is that if there are an infinity of alternative universes, which is a thing that is much more grounded in reality, if you think about it, right? The alternative universe theory is imaginable to us, right? We've explored it in multiple films, while metaphysics really isn't. Like, what is that? It's another plane, like a godlike figure. I just no one has access to it. But if we want to access it, it would be this: if there are an infinity of alternative universes, then in one of them there exists an Earth that could be said to have the best representation of beauty, right? They understand it the most. They have the best intuitions about it. They have a definition of what it is that is better than ours. If you look up in our dictionary, one could find flaws with that. In their universe, it would be the best of that, the least flawed. And this is what I want to kind of move philosophy towards with this podcast. This is my goal. I want to move towards that understanding. And this is why we talked about intuition. We talk about intuitions all the time, right? It's like, in that alternative universe, all the humans are still all the humans, and every contradictory intuition still exists. The more people you bring into the conversation, the more opposition to your flawed theory you receive, and then you can rework it or tell people why their intuition is wrong.
In a certain way, when you let other people, I sort of like your analogy of alternate worlds, but in a certain sense, when you let other people dispute your presuppositions and everything, it's like sort of like you gain access to new worlds, quite literally, because every single person is brought up differently, has different biology, and so they see the world, the same physical world we're in a different way and interpret it in different ways. And so it's quite close to the truth to say that each person has access to an alternate universe, if you consider how differently each person sees the world.
Exactly. I didn't even think about it that way, but it's I'm talking about alternate universes, which to some would almost be a conspiracy theory, but it's so grounded in reality because every single one of our brains is an alternate universe. So I have access to 8 billion of them, and if I can regroup all of that under one definition of beauty, I've kind of achieved my goal. I understand that what Socrates means by the form of beauty, or Plato, is what I'm saying. But the way to phrase it and to make the theory of forms this unattainable thing. In fact, a lot of Plato's scholars have a lot of debates because sometimes the theory of forms is referenced but never explained. And people have trouble understanding what exactly people mean. And it's a very complex theory in the study of Plato, but it doesn't have to be. It's not much more than the perfect representation of what is beauty, the source of all beauty. But when you go back to the biological claim of evolution, right, which they didn't have access to, granted, what is beauty? Well, it's the thing that flares up the beauty recognizing neurons in your brain. So it's not much more than, it's not a thing that exists in a metaphysical plane. It's a thing that is attainable. And when you ask enough people, okay, what do you find beautiful? Do you find this beautiful? And you understand why or why not, why do they find it beautiful? Then that's how you achieve philosophy. So I have, as a joke, I have Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, which is thought to be one of the most influential works of the Western philosophy movement. And I'm going to open a random page and read one random sentence, okay? So, Alex, you're supervising me. I just opened a page in random. I'm going to read the first sentence of the second paragraph. We must first show how the only phenomena with which the ordinary interpretation has any familiarity point back to the primordial meaning of the call of conscience when they are understood in a way that is ontologically appropriate. We must then show that the ordinary interpretation springs from the limitations of the way Dasein interprets itself in falling. And, since falling belongs to care itself, we must also show that this interpretation, in spite of all its obviousness, is by no means accidental. So that was page 341 for everyone who owns the book and wants to fact check me. And this is kind of the problem with philosophy. To me, this podcast is what philosophy has forgotten to do for the last, when was Plato around? Yeah, for the last around 2,000 years. And it's to be, I hate quotes, as you know, but to be by the people and for the people. And that's all I want it to be. I think that in sitting around, I think Socrates' methodology of just sitting around with a bunch of people and bouncing theories off each other, it's the best way to develop a philosophy. And in asking the correct questions, after 2,000 years of human intellectual evolution, we can create something that is attainable to everyday people. And the most informed guess of what should philosophy be. So why even do philosophy, right? And my thing with philosophy is just, it's thinking. It's, instead of cutting someone off at a red light, right? You just think, okay, was that a good thing to do? Okay, but what do I mean by was that a good thing to do? What is good? Should I always be good? Is there any justification to do so? Why, right? And in a way, the way I see it, it's just, philosophy is just religion, right? Philosophy is a religion, but the initial point, and this is my problem with religion, of course, as well. The initial point of religion is like, okay, there's God. Some people a long time ago interpreted his words and wrote it down. Whatever you want to do or determine moral or immoral, you're going to read from those words and everything else follows, right? And this is part of the search for perfection, right? It's like, okay, what is perfect? If its boundaries are perfectly established, then I can follow it. People want an answer, and that's natural. So what is perfect? Probably a sacred book, right? That would be a pretty good thing. You read that sacred book and you base your entire life on it. I think that comes from a lack of thinking. I think most of religious debates come from, no, you should interpret this sentence in this sacred book like this. No, you should interpret it like this. Or this other sacred book is saying this. That's very problematic because you're kind of forgetting the point of it, right? It's the point is to lead all humans in the most perfect way so as we coexist and live in harmony. Well, if you're going to spot a flaw in these sacred books and then just argue about the interpretation of the sentence, then you're misunderstanding the point of it. I think it's just insufficient thinking. Well, okay, what if the thing that a human wrote a couple thousand years ago is the thing that's flawed, and we just need to diverge from that? Like, people give too much weight to those words. And it's the same thing as consequentialism or Kantianism. It's like, no, but this system is perfect, so you must keep it in mind. It's, you have to, it has some validity to it because it's so perfect. It's like, okay, everything is about pleasure. I like that. I like that idea. Let's just follow through with that. Or there are absolutes. You should never lie. Oh, I love that. Or everything that I ever need to know about morality is written in this book. Let's just stick to that, okay? No. Like all of these things are flawed. It's been talked about for thousands of years why it's flawed and how it's flawed. I don't think people have the courage to come up there with their own opinions.
Tupac dead, gotta think for yourself.
Exactly, as Kendrick puts it. And I think that if you simply take the perspective of, okay, look, we're just unicellular organisms that developed an intelligence. What could that possibly mean for philosophy? Is there something perfect? Is there a perfect principle that exists out there in this metaphysical plane that we like to imagine because we want meaning in the universe? Not necessarily, right? What is perfect is simply the thing that makes us function in the most harmonious way. The only reason humans are around is because we created societies and defeated, so to say, the environment, right? The reason we're not being eaten by wolves right now is because we created houses and villages, right? And once you see that, it's like the point of philosophy isn't to kind of touch on this divine principle of morality. That's not a thing. It doesn't exist. The point of it is to develop something that perhaps not irrefutably, but in the least flawed way organizes human society. And thank you for giving me this speech, but I'd like to bounce it off to you because I know I'm the extremist here, and I'm giving all these arguments about how it shouldn't be perfect. But let's just go to our recent episode of critiquing critics' criticism. My problem with what you often say, and I think this is the very reason we're talking about this in the first place, is that you're against this black and white thinking. But my thinking is only black and white in the sense that, okay, there is one side, then there's the other side. Critics are useless or they're useful, right? I want an answer out of you, right? I want you to say, critics are useless. With me, I want you to say that. But it doesn't have to be black and white in this meaning. It can be black and white with all the nuances, right? So I'm saying, okay, it's 100% black, 100% white. Okay, that's my initial kind of instinct. But I've learned to fight that. And what I want from you is to be like, no, okay, here's why it's not 100% critics are useless. And you're like, okay, the people who have watched as many movies as the critics have similar tastes to those people, and using the technical elements of filmmaking would be useful in an analysis of movies to give an answer to the people, to the 99th percentile of people of, okay, this movie is good or not for you, right? And this is where it becomes black and white. So I want an answer, okay, are critics useless or not? But if you're giving me the nuance, okay, critics are useless for 99% of people, and they're useful for that 1% that is at their level. That is exactly my goal. That is why I'm content with it. And look, yeah, I crave these absolutes as well, but when you give me the nuances, it's still an absolute. You understand? When you give me, okay, I'm going to give you this nuance of the 1%. Okay, well, it's still an absolute in the sense that they're useless for 99%. That's absolute, and they're useful for that 1%. And and then if there's additional nuance, where what if that 1% is a very different demographic than the movie was intended for? What if it's like a Disney movie destined for a very high quality, destined for people who have watched a lot of Disney movies, and it's just for kids that are in that 1%? Okay, well, that's fine. You can give me that nuance too, but once you give me the answer of what are all the nuances, I'm allowed to kind of black and white think. Do you understand? So when I'm telling you to give me an answer like, okay, are you on this side or on this side? You can create the sides.
Yeah, I guess I understand. It's not so much black and white thinking in the sense that you're simplifying the problems to their most simple form, explaining something in one sentence, but you just want an answer because you believe there is an answer, right? That's the sort of black and white thinking. There's a set of sentences which string together into meaningful paragraphs that explain the subject 100%. I just went Jordan Peterson all over you guys. Um, well, there's a set of sentences, and within those sentences, words are stringed together. And I guess, yeah, I'm happy to do that because I guess your flaw is that you start off too black and white in a too simple sense, and then we can bring the nuances together and then go somewhere. What you were saying though before about denying the form of beauty and then saying philosophy should just be about our best approximation of the truth within our capacities. We shouldn't go beyond that, right? We should use our rational capacities as we can to best approximate an answer, and that seems a bit relativistic, right? In the sense that the form of beauty is something that's objective. My intuition is that morality is objective and that there is an answer. But when you say that there is no form of beauty and our best approximation is the best guess, and then probably it would be plausible to say that another culture would come up with another answer which gives a solution that's most appropriate for that culture or whatever, that sort of delves into relativism. And I'm sure we're going to do an episode on relativism versus objectivism because it's an interesting subject. But I intuitively, I'm an objectivist in the sense that there is one answer. And yeah, it sort of bugs me when you say that there is no form of, good. But at the same time, I can't tell you what the form of good is.
Okay, this is one of the rare times I'm going to spot a disagreement that we don't have before you. And it's not about there not being a form of good. It's just about, okay, if you imagine my parallel universe thing, the least flawed explanation is something realistic, right? When you take and make it metaphysical or divine, where it's the form of beauty, it's like it would have been done with intention, right? It's like God created beauty, and there was certain intention behind it. The nature is many things, but it's not intentional. It maximizes the good over time. It evolves in a way to filter out all the badness, let's say, right? Humans are imperfect, right? Why do men have nipples, right? So what I'm saying is, if philosophy were to be on the same wavelength as nature, which it is my strong thought that it is, objectivity is simply what is optimal, right? It's the thing that is least flawed that we have now discovered. And this is exactly why I reject as well cultural relativism, is because we're all humans, okay? So if a thing works for them, let's say, for them it works that the capital punishment works for that culture. Well, maybe they just have a better conception of the morality of murder, right? Maybe they have a better conception of there's nothing inherently wrong with killing. Okay. And because we're all human, there is an answer that works for everyone. I agree with that. I don't even think it deserves an episode. Maybe some will think so, but maybe eventually we'll do one. But I certainly agree, because we're all just evolved by nature. And if something works better for another culture, that just means something else is flawed in that culture or in ours. So I certainly think, and again, other cultures are simply parallel universes. And if you see someone with a conception of murder in which less people get murdered, then you have to start asking questions about your own culture, right? I do start off in a way where if the universe was intentional, and I think it's a thing that a lot of humans cling to because, I mean, religion has been so dominant over the years. Certain philosophies that we're going to debunk in the future have been so dominant over the years. People have this thing where it has to be intentional. Therefore, there has to be an answer of lying is always good, lying is always bad. What I've evolved to understand is lying is bad when this, right? We're going to have an episode on lying, and when you add the nuances, it's just a way to kind of box different categories of things up nicely. Look, I'm against categorization, but in the philosophical sense, it's not based on mere intuitions or saving mental space. It's based on rigorous determination and saying, okay, I'm doing this thought experiment. It makes me feel this way. Why does it make me feel this way? What are the categories of this thought experiment, right? What does this reveal about this philosophy? It's a more rigorous categorization, which is why I agree with it. So it's almost like we're concluding on this, but when I'm after an answer, when I'm adamantly chasing an answer from you, what I mean to say is not, look, you have to tell me lying is good or it's bad. No. Once you say, okay, sometimes lying is good, what I want from you is just to say, look, here's a thought experiment. And then from that, we can draw out, okay, yeah, I guess you wouldn't tell a child that isn't feeling pain that they're going to die in 7 days and then let them enjoy those last 7 days without the knowledge of their death and, buy them, I don't know, candy or whatever that you want, right? If the lie is only going to inject bad into the universe, why would you do that, right? And that's what I want from you. You give me one of those thought experiments, I'm like, okay, white lies exist, right? Then we can define white lies. And when we work through it, and maybe we do episode 1 and then we do episode 2 with a guest where they have a different alternate universe in their head, and then we perfect that and we reach that. It's almost it's almost like I'm getting metaphysical, but that's, if you've listened, that's literally the point of not getting metaphysical. But we reach that alternate universe where our conception of lying is the least critiquable, the least counter argumentable. And that's what objectivity is to me. It's not 100%. It's like, okay, sure, it's not 100%, but you've given me the 3%. You've defined the boundaries of the 3% clearly. Okay, you can lie in this. Okay, what's another 5%? Okay, you can also lie to prevent bad things from happening. So white lies exist. Lying to prevent evil exists. The rest isn't justified. That's black and white for me. Even if you're saying that's a gray zone. Okay, but you've put the black outlines around the gray zone. That's all I want from you.
Yeah, I guess to summarize, your point would be that the problem with objective claims as they usually appear, which are short and give an answer to everything, is that if you confronted the person who follows this rule, if they cannot give an explanation for their actions, there's a problem. If the explanation for their actions is, look, there's this maxim which I follow, I am good, there's a problem with that. And intuitively, I think everyone feels that problem. You can't just say, Kant said this, I do this, and now I'm justified. I'm human, you're human, let's talk, explain to me why you're right and I'm wrong. And I think that's the point of this podcast, and I think that's the goal to achieve, an honorable goal to achieve for people in life, is to be able to justify their actions after they do it.
Why? Yeah, exactly. It's not to, point the same way as an atheist would look at someone doing something horrible for religion, right? And say, well, no, you can't point back to God. You're the one who killed all those people because they didn't want to convert to your religion. In the same way, it's like you can't point back to Kant for telling the truth to a serial killer about where someone is because lying is bad. We're having a human conversation with you, and this is just my problem with philosophy throughout history. It's to the same way an atheist sees religious people, normal people these days, they see philosophers, right? It's like what are you chasing, and for whom are you doing it? I think we all have this intuition that it's not black and white. It doesn't have to be in the perfect system, mathematical system of consequentialism. It doesn't have to have all these boundaries, but then people are just too lazy to go further than that. And the problem with atheists, and in fact many of the people who just walk around, because it's not just being an atheist, it's just about not having a belief system. And a lot of people, in fact, I would like to say a majority of people walk around with no defined belief system because, well, religion is too, divine and conspiracy theory-y. Philosophy is too self-contained and this gibberish of what are these people even saying? I don't understand a single word of it. I think philosophy got caught up through the history in doing the exact same thing as religion does. It's like there must be a perfect system out there where one maxim can be deduced into a theory of everything. And I think it's short-sighted. I think that's the reason when people's brains turn off when you say Descartes or Hobbes or whatever. Right, John Locke, Heidegger. It's like, who are these people and what do they have to do with my life? That's kind of what it is. It's like, well, they've worked on this very specific thing that it would honestly take me, starting from zero in philosophy, just to understand what is going on there. I don't think a normal person could do it under 2 years, just to understand what are people saying, what is going on. But this is the problem. And this is exactly what we want, like exactly what I want to fix with this podcast. I want you to tune in on episode 98 that is called Lying, right? And to understand every single thing that we're saying and to be like, well, I disagree with this because of this. You can't do that with, you go from zero to philosophy and you open up a book in philosophy and you're like, okay, well, first of all, I have to learn a new language. What is categorical imperative? What is all of these things? Then you have to understand historically, the historical context of why are these people writing about this? Oh, this war was happening, blah, blah, blah. It's like, and then it's always represented, the philosopher is represented as this lonely figure. Like, well, who are you writing this for ultimately? That is the big upset I had with philosophy. And that's why I understood that if you're not going to do yourself, might as well just not do it. So I think this is good. I think when you're saying there's nuance, what I want from you from this episode on is just to say, well, look, here's a thought experiment that goes against the two categories that you've created and that creates a third one. And then I'm going to be more welcoming and being like, okay, it's black, white, and then also yellow, right? And that's what we can go off of.
For all people listening, Chris seems to be making a lot of demands of me, but I don't think I'm going to change anything in my behavior. And I think he doesn't want me to change anything in my behavior. He's just explaining to the people more intricately what the format of the podcast is. So I'm not being held hostage, and I'm doing whatever I want to be doing and saying whatever I want to be saying.
Blink twice.
There's no cameras. You've designed it that way. No, but I just wanted to say that, what I want from you is to bring nuance, but I think you would agree that that's already what I've been doing, and just defining it in more precise terms is good, I think. So, yeah.
I don't think it's pointless what I'm saying, because the other thing that you can't forget is that you're against my black and white thinking. Well, what I'm saying is that it's not black and white, but it is categorical. And I do demand certain boundaries to be set, just as humans do, but my boundaries aren't give me one fundamental principle and then let's determine the truth of the universe off of that. No, it's like, okay, look, I don't think lying is good because I've encountered this situation in my life. And you're like, well, okay, I think lying is good because I encountered this one. And then I'm like, well, okay, but not in all of these categories of events, lying would be good. And then, okay, well, blah, blah, blah. We create 4 categories instead of 2 that I probably was pushing for at the beginning. But you give me the boundaries of those other 2 that you added, and then we're good. That's what an episode is, right? I think we did this in a lovely way with family. Which is why it's one of my favorite episodes, is because I was like, family is exactly has the same value as friends, right? The exact same value. And then you're like, well, no. Let's create this third category where it's like, okay, yes, you have a blood bond. The blood bond doesn't mean anything, but the fact that you have to spend time with someone you wouldn't choose to spend time with in your life, because you might not like someone in your family, but you have to, live with them almost sometimes. What does this do for you? Well, you know what? It prepares you for the world, because that's what it's going to be sometimes. Oh, I don't like this job, and it's because this person is pissing me off at the office. Well, if you've never encountered a situation where someone gets on your nerves and you have to literally live with them for 8 hours, it's going to be very hard to live, right? So I think if we think in those terms, it's not going to be like you saying, no, it's nuance. There is a spectrum. It's a gray zone. And I'm not going to be saying, no, it's 100% this or 100% that. We're going to be like, okay, it's 91% this, 5% that, and 4% this. But what are these, right? So that's very good. Then we can, based on this, we can have a very short discussion on apologies. Do you want to just switch to the next topic?
Sure.
So, okay. Why philosophy? Because we want to use it, right? If you tune in on our episode, I would love to change a certain behavior, or at least make you write a comment and be like, I disagree because of this, okay? Or if you agree, I don't want you to just be like, wow, these guys are so smart, which probably no one has ever said, but I want you to be like, okay, I'm going to reshape my behavior because this is closer to the truth than my opinion, right? So that's the goal. Our very mission is to make things accessible, which we've talked about how our thing is more accessible than philosophy is, and practical. Because why would we sit down for all this time and do these things if we're not going to use it tomorrow? As soon as we determine something to be better, for example, with the addiction and dopamine, I've determined for myself that music doesn't contribute in any productive way to my life. And I've cut it out, right? It's a radical change for some, but I act in accordance to my beliefs. That's what everyone should do. And of course, if a perfect belief system is determined, and then everyone also acts according to that belief system, we're going to live in a perfect world. Of course, that's never going to happen, but the more we approach it, the more we can be proud of it. So, apologies. For me, goes a little bit into what we've said in the last episode on deserving. And if we are to make apologies practical, the way I see it is, if you went back in time, I wouldn't have done it in 100% of cases, right? You go back in time 10 times. Am I going to do that action 10 out of 10 times? Okay. And the reason to do that is because if you encounter that situation one more time, you would do it differently. But what I mean by that situation isn't just be placed in the same position. I'm saying being placed in that same position with the same knowledge, right? So let's say you tell me something and you're gonna forget to tell me that it's a secret, right? And then I tell that something to someone who you would have preferred that I don't tell it to, okay? So let's say you tell me, oh, I got these flowers for my girlfriend, right? And then I see your girlfriend before you do, and then I'm like, oh, I didn't know you like roses because he bought them for you, right? And then she's like, what? He bought me them? And then that same night was her birthday and wanted to surprise her, right? But you didn't tell me. It would put me in an uncomfortable situation where some people would say, I have to apologize to you because I revealed your secret. But the thing is, I was operating on the information that that's not a secret. And in 10 out of 10 times, if you re-put me in that situation with that information, I would have told her to. So if you want to make apologies in philosophy, of course, practical, then you should apologize for things that become lessons to you in the sense that if you had thought more about them, you would have not done it. This is what I mean, right? And let's say you did say it was a secret, but I instinctively, let's say we're walking by a flower shop and I say, oh, he got you those, right? Oh, those are your favorite ones, right? And then she says, how do you know this? And I'm like, oh, well, because he got you them. But you did tell me it was a secret. Well, that's a situation where I should apologize to you, correct? Now, why is that? And it's because if I had thought my actions through, in the other 50% of cases where I did think through my intuition of saying that to her, I wouldn't have revealed your secret. And this is where apology becomes practical in the sense that I wouldn't have done it 10 out of 10 times. You understand?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you've said so far. Just to add, I in the first situation where I tell, where someone tells someone's girlfriend, "Oh, he bought you those flowers." I think if I was in that situation and I told the girlfriend about the flowers, I would still, say sorry to the person. But because I've thought about it and I agree with you, but I would still say sorry to the boyfriend. But in this instance, I think it's not an apology, right? It's just, oh, I'm sorry this situation occurred. I'm not saying blame is on me. I'm not saying blame is on you, but blame is sort of on you. But it's not a sorry. It's not a sorry of. It's not an apology. It's not saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did that. I shouldn't have done that." You should not have done that, but you had no way of knowing, so there's no guilt to be associated with it, right? There's no, "Oh, I should have thought further and realized this," because you had no way of knowing. And so the sorry is more like, "Oh, I'm sorry. This is a bad situation to find yourself in," sort of uh, empathetically, but not an apology in the sense that you should feel guilty and you made a mistake.
See, okay, if I look up the definition of apology, it's a regretful acknowledgement of an offense or failure. But here's the thing. Now that we've discussed philosophy, it becomes easier for me to say this. Like, I've never liked when people say, this family member died. I'm so sorry, right? It's not your fault. Why? What are you apologizing for? So I understand you're introducing the new concept of there's a way to say sorry where you're acknowledging blameworthiness, but another one to say, I'm sorry this situation happened to you. Yeah, which is not an apology, really. I get what you're saying, but in creating these two categories, well, one of them is kind of unproductive. Like, okay, one of the sorries means if I'm put back in the same situation, this will not happen again because I'll think it through, right? But another situation is just like, I feel compassion towards you. Now, that's not a productive that's not a productive sorry for me because I just don't, I feel like there could be other words used that would better transmit that thought. Because I just looked up the definition of apology. Well, okay, but you did say that's a sorry that doesn't transfer into an apology. But that's problematic to me because I feel like what you're saying is, I'm here for you. This is unjust, maybe. Maybe you didn't deserve this, or I'm here if you need anything. That's kind of what you're transmitting as a thought, and that those things transmitted more accurately. And here's a kind of a gray area of the in between of what you're saying. Accidents, right? Dropping something on someone's foot. Let's say you were just walking. I don't know, you didn't sleep well or whatever. Accidents happen. There was something on the ground that you didn't see, and you drop your coffee on someone. Well, in reality, what that sorry would mean, it would be, I'm sorry for the situation happening to you. It's not an apology because, well, look, you weren't aware of the thing on the floor, right? But it seems as though because your hands did it, it's an apology. Well, it's a sorry that means an apology. But I like to determine those things, because I know some people are over apologetic in their lives, and in having those two uses of the word sorry, you can get mixed up between the two. And it's like you can take more responsibility than you deserve, let's say. Now we have to be careful with that word, but because you're just using the thing that means completely two different things. Do you not understand how it would be problematic to just have that? That's honestly, I'm completely opposed to having the sorry that this is happening to you and not sorry that I caused this, because it's unproductive, one, and two, it's a kind of a mutually exclusive definition with the primary definition, and in using it, you would never, well, you wouldn't always explain yourself, and it would attribute more blame to you than you deserve.
Well, I think it's not mutually exclusive with the first one, right? When you say sorry in the first meaning, which is I'm sorry I did this, you also are sorry for the situation the person is placed in. But what I would say is, okay, look, in the gray zone area, in the gray zone example, first of all, if you redo that thing 10 times, then maybe your brain functions differently, and then you notice that thing on the ground and you don't do it. I mean, I'm not sure the parameter how your parameters work on that 10 worlds example, but and then that would be worthy of an apology, but not because of some conscious bad action you did or because of you not thinking enough. But I mean, my problem, I personally don't see a problem with this word having two definitions. I see what you're saying in that someone who doesn't practice philosophy and someone who doesn't think as they should could sort of associate those two together. And when there's something that's entirely not their fault, just sort of an accident of the world, not even of their misplacement or something, or their clumsiness, they say sorry and feel guilt for that. But I think in that situation, it's sort of just on them to think a bit more and be like, okay, I can say sorry without needing to feel guilt. I guess you should look up sorry to see exactly what it means. But another way of using the word sorry is to say, I feel sorry for you. And I don't see how you could have a problem with that sentence, right? I feel sorry for you. That's just like a feeling you can have for someone where there's absolutely no blame, even in the common use of the phrase I feel sorry for you. Yeah, and also in those situations where you tell the girlfriend and you weren't supposed to, but you didn't know, and what did you say, a family member dies or something, and you say sorry. I mean, the alternative, okay, sure, you could use other words to portray what you're saying, but honestly, it would just be awkward. Is like, I feel empathetic that you find yourself in this position. If you want to make philosophers lonely and seem weird, that's the way to do it, Or the alternative of an accident happens, and then you go through the mental process. Oh, it's not my fault. I could not have prevented this. I say nothing. I turn around and walk away. That sort of, it is not productive to the social interaction.
Okay, you're right. I looked it up. Definition 1 is feeling distress, especially through sympathy for someone else's misfortune. And then definition 2 is feeling regret or penitence, which is exactly what I mean by sorry all the time. So, okay, yes, now we've defined those two, right? That's the nuance. And I don't think I could have gotten to the point we are now if we didn't do the philosophy thing first. But now that we know this, and this is what I hate about dictionary definitions. It's almost like they're saying, well, apple is a red round fruit, but it's also just any round fruit, right? It's so bad. I think people, okay, but you will agree with me that people overuse the apologetic sorry?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way I'm saying it makes sense to me, obviously, because I'm saying it. But I think often when people for accidents apologize, they really do take on blame, and that is problematic. I agree with you. When you say you're sorry for a certain situation, you should restrict it to that. Oh, you find yourself in that situation. In the example you gave where the person tells the girlfriend, it's literally the boyfriend's fault that the girlfriend knows, right? Because if you didn't want the girlfriend to know, you would tell absolutely no one, right? Or if you told someone, you would take the precaution of telling them, this is a secret, do not tell her. And then the blame is on the other person if they do. But in that situation, it just seems crazy to say sorry, because not only is it not your fault, it's literally another person's fault entirely.
Yeah, exactly. It's the apologetic sorry that bothers me, and it's by defining the limits. But the thing is, to the recipient of the sorry, it's hard to understand which one you mean, and you can. I feel like it could damage someone's integrity to over interpret sorry as an apology, right? Because it's like some people just take on more blame than they should. Maybe there could it be found that there's a different way to administer it? An apologetic sorry should be with, I don't know, a face of regret, whatever that is, and the other sorry is a face of empathy. Those are the two are so close. But I think at the very least, if your intentions are to cast the sorry in the correct way, maybe it will come out in the correct way. That's fair to say. So maybe this would be more of a message to the people that are over apologetic in their lives. And it's like, let me redefine what I mean in the 10 out of 10 situations. What I mean by that is simply, in the time that you were given to think about it, could you have come to a different conclusion than to do this action? And let's say in the morning you meet your friend and you see him with flowers, and you had until the evening to internalize that they told you it was a surprise, and then you blurt out the thing to the girlfriend, then that's a situation you should be sorry for, because if you had thought about it more or given more weight to the person's words, you would have, right? But if, let's say you give that information to me in the case where he didn't tell you it was a surprise, I think about it 10 out of 10 times, and it's like, well, if it was important enough for me to not reveal it to her, he would have told me it was a surprise, right? That's my ultimate conclusion after hours of thinking. And I reveal it to the girlfriend, and it's like, okay, now it transitions from a sorry, I apologize to sorry, you put yourself in this situation, right?
So I think, as all our episodes are, is just, this discussion is a caution to people to think when they use the word sorry. It could be detrimental in two ways. First of all, there's some people who just by temperament, right, they're just more agreeable, and they tend to take on blame and see others as more positively than they should. That when they say sorry in the accident sense, where no blame should be taken on by that person, they do take on blame. They feel bad, and I mean, I'm not a consequentialist, but negative emotion is bad when you could not have it, and you should not have it. That's the first way. And the second way it could be problematic is when you receive the sorry from someone when it's an accident, or when even it's your fault, or when something like that occurs, and you sort of take that as an apologetic sorry, and you blame that person, and you start to see that person as worse because they made this mistake. That is to be avoided as well. You shouldn't think more negatively about a person after something they had no control over.
And as you said, you're not a consequentialist, but you are a psychologist, and well, negative emotionality is just to be avoided. That's clear. And if we take an example from our last episode about the smoothie server serving a smoothie with glass to someone accidentally, well, once you determine the modalities of what exactly was her intention, would she have done it in 10 out of 10 times, or did she have small intuition that what she was doing was wrong, right? Once you analyze that and you determine that, look, let's say the smoothie girl was trained to scoop up the glass, the ice with the glass directly and not the ice scooper, and the moment that the glass broke into the smoothie, she just, there is no way. You give her an hour to think about it, she would have done the same thing. I think that a lot of blame, a lot of negative emotions, a lot of grief, I guess a lot of perturbance, a lot of PTSD could be avoided when you understand exactly where to cast the blame. And of course, it comes back to our episode on intentionality. if your intentions were purely good and you thought about it enough, right, to every reasonable standard, you are not to be blamed. And that's where, let's say she visits the guy with the glass in his neck in the hospital, horrible to say, but whatever. That sorry is going to be like, I'm sorry the universe let it happen to you, right? It's, well, once, of course, you determine complete lack of blameworthiness, right? Again, I don't know the exact situation, but if we do, and I think that using that sorry consciously in that manner, although it's your hands that did the bad thing, I'm using quotes right now, it would free you of blame and distress that doesn't belong to you.
And I think that's a useful thing with a bit of further thought. In a lot of situations, I think you can find that blame often doesn't lay on humans, right? And I think it hurts no one to put blame on just the universe, Mother Nature. Not Mother Nature. We love Mother Nature. But, the environment, the randomness of the world. Sometimes people get unlucky, bad things happen. And I think, you harbor less resentment when you don't blame it on people. When you blame it on people, you can sort of start to develop an idea of people as evil and as doing all these things, even though if you think a bit further, it's just, unluckiness. And I don't think there's as much resentment. I think some people resent the world for what it's done to them, but I think there's a much lower resentment production when you don't blame it on humans and when you're just like, I got unlucky. It's not that person's fault. They had good intentions. It's more productive that way.
Yeah, and as we discussed last episode, as our threats become less and less environmental and more human, back in the day, it's like, oh, a fire ravaged a village. Who do you blame? Nature. A bear attacked our encampment. That's the thing. Whatever. Who do you blame? Mother Nature. Now it's like, okay, well, we live in cities, blah, blah, blah. We move in cars. Who's the biggest threat? Other humans. And it's like, okay, well, whatever bad thing happens now, it can't be nature, right? We've gone past that. It must be these other constituents of the society. So I think it's a product of the times, of this over apologetic nature where it's like, no, that's what the randomness of the universe is. The fact that that human didn't look under her feet and see a wet floor where there shouldn't be and slipped and spilled the coffee on your new suit, that is nature. That is not her, right? And it's often like, yeah, once we shift to this view that the threat is human, it's like, whatever human was the closest to the thing, that's who we blame. We gotta point fingers. The legal system defends us, right? It's like, oh, we're so secluded from nature. If we blame someone, that will save us in the future. It's like, oh, this will prevent things from happening. It's like this involuntary manslaughter thing. How is that a crime even? How is that even a thing, right? So, yeah, you know what? Do you have a big point?
Has absolutely nothing to do with apology, I think. But what you just said made me think that I think it's the pretentiousness of the human race these days of, stupid people, but just everyone thinking that, oh, the human race won, we have control over the universe and over nature and everything, and we know everything. Science is so evolved, we're the best, blah, blah, blah. And that makes them think that we have complete control over everything, and that means that blame must be placed on humans, right? And I think for some people, it's inevitable, right? It's always someone's fault. Just a simple thought experiment of, look, you go back a couple 100 years, and we sort of sucked. We were like mid-level animals, and sometimes, lady luck or nature or the environment just messed with us, or there's no intentionality behind it. We anthropomorphize these concepts, but it's just stuff happening to you, and there's no resentment to be harbored from this. So yeah, that made me think that maybe a source of this is the feeling of power that normal people have of like, oh, we've gained control over the environment and over everything. We're all powerful. Now everything is someone's fault. I must blame it on someone, where it shouldn't be like that.
Exactly. Because we own nature, we also are responsible for every single thing that happens in it. And just, I mean, yeah, as you said, simple thought experiment. Someone picked up their school bag after studying at a cafe and dropped a paper, and then a server slips on that paper and breaks her skull. Everyone would love to be like, you know what, that's involuntary manslaughter or something like that, right? Like, let's point a finger, someone died, something horrible happened. And it's like, well, yeah, but could that person have prevented it from happening? By being more careful about dropped papers, I guess, right? But it's just unreasonable to demand that of humans. So again, because it was a 2-subject episode, I was gonna give it a figured it out rating of the average of the two. But I think that the first one, which was a 10 for me, gave way for the second one to be a 10. So I'm comfortable with a 10 today.
Yeah, I think the first one was a more, I don't know if it's touchy, but a more, difficult one, and one that necessitated a lot of brain power. And then the second one was sort of easy after that because of the first one, maybe. But I feel good about a 10 today. The second discussion was easy, and that's definitely a 10. And I think the first one, we said pretty good things, yeah. 10 out of 10 today.
Yeah, because also we put our theory to the test about, black or white, and then you also, right, like there was the category of, okay, there's a dual definition to the word sorry. One is apologetic, the other is not. So, one sentence summary, let me try here. First one, I guess I would say we're trying to bring back philosophy of the for the people, because philosophy forgot its purpose. Again, you can argue on that. And for apology, it's don't take on more blame than you deserve.
Pretty much. A good way, another way of putting the first one is just philosophy is thinking, and everyone can do it. And then for the apology, just think about what you're saying and the meaning of your words when you say sorry. And that's it. That's all there is to it.
Lovely. What a beautiful episode. If you want more information, go on thinkingbros.com or contact us at thinkingbros@gmail.com, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.